Andrea, looks like you're ready to go.
I'm ready to go. Alrighty. So just like I said, this is just our first slide here. So if you want to go to the next one, we can go in. All right. So what we're looking at, and for this slide and for our initial enrollment, we're looking at our transmission system only, not our distribution. Looking at maybe some of our fee land, but for the purposes of what we have here, this is transmission only. So we're looking at 13,000 corridor miles, a little bit over, across 7 states and operating areas, and all those different colors you see on the map are different operating companies. Through the whole system, we work on either a 4 or 5 year maintenance cycle. So each line comes up on routine. Some areas are 4 years, some areas are 5 years. And we fully work plan all of our corridors. We send work planners out and they record everything that needs to be done in each span. And I'll get into that in a little bit, but we do that fully for every corridor, starting October the year before up to, it has to be completed by June 1st of the maintenance year to get all our planning complete and everything in there. And all of our maintenance and herbicide work is inspected by our transmission vegetation management staff, our different specialists, foresters, work planners. We have a large amount of people who go out there and make sure that everything has been completed that need to be completed within the planning or extra work that was found from aerial patrols, what have you. If you want to go to the next one, please. Thank you. So our different regulatory requirements, like DOT had theirs, if you're transmission or electrical, you're familiar with a lot of these. We have to abide by the FAC 003 for our standards, the federal acts for herbicides and pesticides, fungicides, all of those. Our T&E species that we have. For state regulations, we have our public utility commissions on various states. We have mileage and corridor completion reporting that we have to abide by, notification requirements that we have to abide by. New Jersey is a special animal all on its own. So we have different items out there. We have an entire website dedicated to just T&E species and everything we have for New Jersey, and Department of Agriculture in each different state, along with your various state agencies, state parks, state game lands, state forests, anything you might have to deal with that we have to do extra permitting, anything like that for each one. For our environmental work restrictions, we have a 5-year permit that we operate underneath for New Jersey specifically that we have to go through each year, or every 5 years, and abide by that each year we do maintenance work. It's highly regulated for threatened and endangered species and wetlands by both federal and state. So like I said, we have a dedicated website just to keep track of that for all our maintenance work. And then other states as directed, be it our state, what qualifies in state, local, things like that we have to abide by. So all of those fall underneath what we have to do regularly. If you want to go to the next slide, please. Thank you. For a notification, and I put this in here just because it was brought up as we were going through the Department of Agriculture issues we had earlier. And this is a slide out of our standard work planner training and specification training that we go through each year for all of our planners. So for our notifications, there is that general notification letter there that is sent out to all property owners along a corridor. The work planners do research to begin with, make sure they have all the addresses from the tax records for everybody who lives along that corridor, and that does get sent out. It does get sent by both certified letter and U.S. mail, and we try to send it out before the crews come through to mark the tree work and the work that needs to be done in each span. Now, this letter does not supersede any restrictions by label or law. So if there is a restricted easement or anything for that property owner in there, this does not supersede it. It is just our general notification letter of, hey, we're coming out to do marking for our regular maintenance. These are the types of activities that may be involved, with phone numbers they can use to contact people. So on the left there, you can see we do certified mail. We have a contact form down in West Virginia. Certified mail that they have to sign for does not count as personal notification. They have to personally notify everybody, so they have to go door to door and get signatures from all property owners. We also have those 2 different door cards that we have, various, if it's planned work, we tend to use the orange one, the white one's for emergency work. If we have to go in there for, a tree fell over or something like that, we'll hang that door card up. We also do run monthly newspaper ads because of the restrictions for herbicide use of needing to be notified within 45 days. So we do run a monthly ad in all of the newspapers that cover all of our service territory once a month that just states what work we may be doing in the area with regards to herbicides, with a call-in 800 number that they can use to call in if they have any questions or look for locations. And we also have on our external website for what the public can get to, they put an article out each year that lists out all the neighborhoods we'll be working in for the year and what the plan is for both distribution and transmission. So all that information is available to the public and landowners as we go through our work each year for who gets notified of what. Next slide, please. So for our work planning, I did say we did record all the work needs in the span. What you see on the screen there is from our internal program of what work will be found in that span, and all of that goes into a database that can be pulled out for reports both by the crews and by us to see what's out there square footage wise. So we keep track of mowing, hand cutting, ground to sky is the trimming for the side trees. Any widening we may have, if they're yard trees, if we have any special conditions, all that gets put in. And for the main thing for the CCAA that we work with is we work with sustainable brush. So what you see on the right is straight out of our specification. So for us, sustainable brush, we calculate the percentage of the span that will sustain brush by starting with 100% and subtracting areas that are not compatible with sustaining brush, such as agricultural fields. These are active ones, so be they hay, planted fields, things like that. Roadways, maintained lawns, parking lots, bodies of water, etc. If it's not going to sustain brush, we're taking it out of there. We're not going to be managing anything on there. Just a note on that, on the pastures, we do count that in sustainable brush because they're not mowed, they're not maintained by anything other than the animals. They don't eat everything we want them to eat all the time. So when it comes to that, we don't count pastures and towers, even if it is maintained an active agricultural field. We do record tower centers between 5 and 10% sustainable brush to account for anything we need to do at the tower centers where the tractors can't get to, because they really that like eye shape around the poles, especially the H-frames. So we do need to make sure that we go in generally before the crops go in and do any work we need to do around the tower centers. Okay, next slide, please.
Hey, just a quick question.
Yeah.
This is Tim again. Are you using any kind of mapping program, or are you using your own information to make these designations?
We do have a mapping program. I should put a picture of that in. I have a picture out of it later. It's a mapping program that was designed relatively in-house, that it has all the widths already added in, or all the lengths of the spans pole to pole from engineering, and that's calculated internally. So when they put their 95% of the span can sustain brush because there's a road going through it, it automatically counts the acreage, the square footage, and all that for them. Okay. And it is all added in there.
Yeah.
So what's on here is, from what we've been told by our contractors, the most complicated and annoying timesheet known to man in the electrical and maintenance world. This is the one we've used for years. All crews fill this out every week for what they've done during the week, and we have task codes for everything. There is a task code for on-corridor trees, for off-corridor trees, for cutting of brush with herbicide, for cutting of brush without herbicide, mowing, the cut stubble, everything has its own task code. So these get filled out every week, including the square footages and herbicide amounts everything goes on here. And this can all be accessed and aggregated through our report environment. So when it comes to reporting for the CCAA, I can go in and pull out what came in on the timesheets. Okay, and they have spans locations for each one. So I know in this span, we had the mowing of this, we had this herbicide or this selective hand cutting, this selective herbicide treatment. It all gets aggregated in through here, so I can pull all of it out and aggregate it for our reporting processes.
Sorry, is that tied to GIS? Like, so you can import the timesheet entries into GIS and then just pull that spatially and calculate your acreages that way?
I wish.
Oh, okay.
No. No. Okay. We've had this spreadsheet since before we had a mapping program. So they have not connected the two yet. We're hoping in the future that that can be done. But in this case, we do have for each corridor and each span has its own identifying number. So I can take it back. It just takes some work.
Thank you.
And what's on the timesheet should match up to what's on the work planning. So I can still use what is already in the mapping program to look and get a very close estimate. They're not going to be that far off. So it helps out a lot to go through there for our reporting. All right, next slide. All right, so for our sampling, and this is what it looks like in our mapping program. This is what we'll see. We work in spans, so it's pole to pole. And then each star you see is the middle of the span. And what we're looking at for our sampling, because we do have this, and each of those has a very unique identifier that goes with each one of those. We're looking at to do our random sampling to pull out all of our spans that are on maintenance for that year, pull them out, and we are looking at putting them into like Excel with a random number generator and basing off the percentage for each operating company. We were talking the CCAA can work in like project level, state level. If you recall that slide at the very beginning with our map of all different color coding, we're looking at working at the OPCO or the operational company level. So for example, if Penelec has 20% of the acres that will be enrolled for that year, it'll get 20% of the inspection samples. So that's what we're looking at with that. And we are planning on pulling out the spans that have 10% or less sustainable brush, just to make sure that we do have an area when we go out for those. Like I said, those tend to be just the tower centers in the middle of farm fields, or very low areas where to meet our sample size or recommended sample size when you go out, we are pulling those out so we can make sure that we're not going to get out there and not have enough area to actually complete a sample. And we are working with real estate and the mapping departments to figure out how to segment the fee property and include that in this process as well as we're going through. And then once these areas have been selected via the random number generator, we are going to send them to local TVM staff. That's our transmission vegetation management staff, to ensure safety, because we do have people who aren't quite stable as property owners out there. So we want to make sure that we're not going to go into where a property owner has issued threats or there's other safety concerns in case it ends up being someone who's not familiar with the system. We don't want to put anybody in danger. So our protocol that we're going to implement for that, to still keep its standard and to still try to keep it underneath the random protocols, is if there is a safety concern in that span that we cannot send somebody in there, we'll move that sample location to the closest span geographically that meets the criteria that is safe for someone to access. So that's what we're looking at implementing for the sampling protocols for verification of work and those that kind of thing. Next slide, please. There we go. And going with that, this is a separate entity. I'm working closely with the environmental department and other departments to try to make this a joint venture. And the environmental inspectors use Survey 123 that they do for their inspections that they do, and we're looking at implementing and putting the sample, the scorecard itself that was created into Survey 123, so that people can go out and use that in there, and we can aggregate it into one location. Right now, it's only accessible by the environmental department and not TVM, so we are looking at that as well. And we are under debate of who will be conducting the surveys. It's going to be likely split between our environmental inspectors and our TVM staff. If we can set it up, that we're trying to hope to do it so that we can do it with people's schedules, because we do have large tracks where you can go 10 miles between road crossing to road crossing, and we don't want to have this one random sample right in the middle of that tract and have somebody to have to go the whole way in there just to get that sample. So we're going to try to work it so that because we do inspect all of the work, if the specialist for that area for TVM has to go back in there and complete their inspections for the maintenance work or anything else, that they can take it with them and do it at that time to save time and effort between everybody. So that's something we're looking at and trying to minimize the effort and get our best results we can for the tracking purposes. Next one. All right. So for our challenges, we currently don't have a central location for reporting. There's multiple different departments, and our departments use different servers, different mapping programs, and reporting programs. We're not all consistent across the entire company. So that's something we're trying to figure out how we're going to do so that everybody can access all the information who needs to. Our fee land is not all mapped at this point. Working with real estate, they are actively putting them in there, and they've taken a great interest in this as well, because they have been sorting out which lands to keep, which lands to sell off. So this gives them another factor to consider when they're looking at whether or not to keep a property. So they're very excited about this as well, and are extremely helpful to try to work out what we're looking at. So they are loading it into our mapping program and working closely with us to see what we're doing. But for a lot of that land, the uses are unknown. So it might be fee land, but it might not be one we want to enroll. So we have to take it as a case-by-case basis. Our maintenance practices are also run by different departments. So within all those things we've gone over, we have maintenance practices by TVM staff, environmental, OPCO facilities has their own, and new construction as well. So it's going to take a lot of coordination to make sure that what we do in our maintenance activities for TVM on a transmission line that we want to count as enrolled lands and things that we've done for the year for the CCAA isn't completely bulldozed over by new construction and we didn't know what happened after we went on and did our inspection. Or, you know, mats put down, whatever the case may be. So it's working closely with all of those guys to try to figure out how we're going to do this, how we're going to track it, getting all the information pulled together. And all of our actions are documented differently. We have the very detailed timesheet. Other places may not. Some use SAP, some use a different program. It's just a matter of how is it documented, how detailed is the documentation, and how can we fit it all into one location is one of our biggest challenges. Next slide. All right, so right now our plan that we're looking at is we do want to get our application in within, the 3 months after approval. So that's something we're going to be actively working on here. We are going to utilize the ramp-up period. And so we're looking at enrolling all of our transmission lands over 4 years of maintenance. We'll add in that extra 5th year for those that are in a 5-year rotation as set-asides at some point in time, just to get everything rolled in, and we keep our percentages where they need to be for enrollment for each year. And we're looking at entering the fee lands as they're located and our use is determined. We do have large tracts of the old landfills from the power plants that are mown once a year, so they'd be an incredible addition to this. It's just a matter of getting them located, getting everything rolled in, as we can get them in there without overburdening everyone to try to figure out what we're doing. And looking at incorporating our other departments, like I said, for the landfills, the different environmental projects that are out there, and if there's any way to bring distribution and that kind of area in. So I'm trying to remember, is there one more slide or is that my last slide? That was my last slide. Okay, so any questions?
One last one. I know we're over time. How are you planning to comply primarily? You mentioned set-asides. A lot of the utilities are talking about, they can meet like 80–90% of their goals with set-asides. How are you guys going to do that?
With what we have, our specification was revamped in 2017. So the entire specification is based off of IBM. And so all of our herbicide use, the way we operate herbicides, the way we train our herbicide vendors, the mowing that we do, everything that we have implemented that we do for our maintenance activities, about 80% of it actually falls underneath the compliances for the practices for the CCAA. There's only a couple things, like we still in some areas, because of the remoteness of it, and maybe the birch overgrew or something, we will have to implement an aerial spray that time for that maintenance cycle. But those are becoming fewer and fewer far between. So vast majority of our herbicide is selective treatment of woody species only, leaving all the herbaceous growth. Same with mowing. Our mowing right now is, we're having some issues with raspberries taking over the corridor. So we're mowing those back to let the herbaceous stuff come through. Same with invasive species. So vast majority of our maintenance practices, I would say about 80% at this point, for those areas that we have sustainable brush, will fall underneath what we have for the CCAA for compliance.
All right, thanks. Wow. Nice presentation, by the way, really good, thanks. Both of them were.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea. And yeah, we are just over time, so I guess just we take one more question, if there is one. No? Okay. Yeah, thank you, Andrea. That was a great presentation and impressive effort to try to get all those different operations and regions all on the same page. So it sounds like you've had some good success getting everybody in the same room though, so that's great.